Okay, now let's get back to our painting example. And in our painting example, we'll just add a plane on which our ball will sit, and we'll make it some kind of grayish value. And okay, now we can start painting. But there's one more thing we need to do. Now, if we remembered, this is the base value of our plane, of this field, of this surface, whatever this is, a table. But this is not the base value of this surface in light. So now we have to figure out what is the, because again, this whole table is in light because there is a light source coming from here, right? So this whole table will be in light. So we need to figure out what will be the light value of our table. Now we said before that our light is just basically white, kind of a white light. So again, we just do the simple thing. We take the light and we take our table value and just choose a middle value. So this will be, so this will be the value of our table in light. And again, our table also follows the rules of light. So we do also will have a halftone, right? Because again, light loses intensity as it kind of travels, right? We have to keep that in mind. Light also loses intensity. So we have to, so we can add like a bit of halftone somewhere in here. There you go. So now we have a table. Now, we want to do the bounce light. Now let's do the bounce light on a sphere. So we'll take the value of our sphere, and we'll take the value of the bounce light. So it's somewhere like this value right here, and it's bouncing into our sphere, which has the value of black, which is this. So again, we find the middle value between these two. The middle value is something like this. Now we have to keep in mind that the shadow area is always darker than the light area. So this is something we have to kind of pay attention to, so we don't accidentally make this too bright. Now this is a bit too bright for me, so I'll just go one or two shades darker. Like this for now. And now I'll apply this basically all over our sphere. Oops. And I'm basically just gonna take a bit of this shadow value and bring it back into this bounce light just to kind of darken the top a bit. And maybe now I want to still keep the Terminator. I want to keep it. I don't want to remove it. But it will have to get brighter as it gets lower. But I still want you to have a sense of this transition, right? I still want you to feel like there is a transition here, right? So I'm just like slowly building this, and I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to get a slightly brighter tone here, just a bit bright, to give it a bit more volume. And you know what? Now there's still a bounce light coming from this direction too, right? Now I'm not going to do the whole thing and try to find the middle value. I'm just going to take a bit of this value and put it right here on the rim of the ball. I'm just going to put a bit of that value right here. Okay, so this is basically done with our bounce light, our reflected light. So now let's add a bit of ambient occlusion. Now, as we said, ambient occlusion gets pretty dark as it gets closer to the bottom. So we're just going to use a very dark, almost black, basically black value. Just put it right here. Just right here, just a bit of it, and maybe add a bit of it right here. Because again, that's also pretty close to the shadow. And there you go. This is our sphere reflecting light. But hold on, wait a second. What's going on? What about this? What about this? Okay, we'll talk about this right now. Okay, so let's talk about cast shadow for a second. The basic rule of thumb is you take the height of your sphere, which is this, and you connect the source of your light to the top of the sphere. and that's how you get the distance of your cast shadow, right? This is how you get the distance of your cast shadow. Now again, this is more of a perspective thing. I'm not going to be getting too deep into this, but that's basically the idea. Now for my example, I'm going to keep this simple. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. So we'll just create a kind of a good enough looking shadow shape. I'll just give it a temporary value for now. So just kind of thinking like kind of where it would end, and I guess it would probably be somewhere like here. Okay, good enough. Here's the thing with drop shadows, no one really cares, and no one really knows, and no one really cares, so don't obsess too much about it. Now, what is the value of our drop shadow? Now, it's a type of shadow, but here's the thing, it's looking up completely, and there's literally no light hitting it, and there is very little light reflected into it. But the basic value of this shadow would be whatever is the value of the environment. You know, in our case, its pitch is basically black, so the value of this will be just black, right? Because again, where is the light hitting it? Where is the light coming from? Now, there is a bit of reflected light hitting our cast shadow, and where it's coming from? It's coming from the sphere. So we have light coming from here, hitting the plane, going back into the sphere, hitting the sphere, then reflecting back into the cast shadow. Now it's not a lot, but it does happen. So we'll just take the value of our sphere, this kind of middle value on our sphere. I'll take this one, and I'll just take that, and I'll find the middle between the black and that one. This looks like it, and so I'll just like cover this whole part of the shadow with that value. But we again, as we know, occlusion shadows. Right here below the ball, here we'll have a completely, here we will have very strong occlusion shadow, because it's very difficult for light, even that reflected light, to get into that. So we're just going to do something like this, and I'm going to take this value and spread it a bit like here. So there it is. Now we have a bit of light reflecting on the shadow, and we have a fairly passable render of a sphere. So let's give a bit of resume. So we had a base value from which we defined our light shape. We had a base value from which we defined our shadow value, and our light value, right? And all these different types of shadows and light we talked about right now essentially got created by light hitting our object and our object reacting to it in different ways. This is the only thing you really need to keep in mind. It's just the basic principles. So for example, we have our light hitting our object right here. And because this plane is facing the light directly, it creates a highlight. Now as our light travels lower, it creates a half tone as it travels, because these planes of the ball are not directly facing the light, up to the point at which we get to the terminator, which is the point at which light is parallel to the edges of our sphere and creates this dark band around it. As we kind of go lower, we enter into this reflected light area where the light of this surface on which our ball is sitting on gets reflected back into it. And as we travel lower, we get to the occlusion shadow, which is the darkest part of the sphere where it's sitting on the ground. And we finally get to the reflected, to the cast shadow on the floor of the ball casting its shadow onto the floor, literally. The thing that I want you to keep in mind is just not the names. The names really don't matter. What just matters is that you understand that light bounces and that it reacts to the surfaces of the objects that it's hitting. And it's on you to now figure out how that will happen. I'm giving you the basically rules of thumb, but the real world, that's something you just need to figure out on your own when you start painting, when you start developing your paintings and rendering.